Yeah, I never met someone like you. Oh, to your mama, she a blessing.
Welcome, Kristin Chadwick, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for coming on. Today, we're going to have you on as a podcast coach. And I think this is going to be the first time ever here in Coaching in Session, where we're going to have an expert podcast coach come on a podcast and help us understand about podcast coaching. So I'm excited to get to know about the work that you do. In your own words, can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help people become better podcasters?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm honored that I am the first podcast coach here. And my name is Kristin Chadwick. I have two of my own shows. One is called Wholistic Hearts. It's more of a ministry. And then the other one is Holistic Podcasting, podcast coaching for female entrepreneurs. And that is really where my heart and soul of my business is. It is where I get to talk about all the things that I get asked commonly over the last 8 years of being in podcasting in various positions as a podcaster. So I love coming alongside podcasters and helping them really get to the heart of why they're podcasting and how to align themselves to their podcast and their business to help it succeed.
Well, let's get into the nitty gritty, right? What does it take to be a successful podcast host or to have a successful podcast?
Okay. So I am a big stickler for knowing your why. So first we would sit down and we would talk about, okay, well, why do you want to produce a podcast or record a podcast? Most of the time there is a dream of like, well, I don't know. I've always wanted to start a podcast about blah, blah, blah. And that's great. That's a great place to start. And then we start to unpack, all right, now let's get a plan in place because most podcasters can kind of jump the gun and they just start recording. And then about 3 months in, they think, oh no, what did I do? What's this content I'm bringing to the table? So I want to help people avoid that burnout or that overwhelm of where you get into that frozen place of like, oh no, I don't know what to talk about. So I like to come beside people and really outline a plan in place. And I love to talk about it in a year from now. So where do you want it to be from today to a year from now? And so we map out a whole strategy on how to do that well and how, again, that alignment with who you are and what you're doing and what you want your podcast to ultimately do.
Yeah, sometimes people can jump the gun, as you said. They get in, under the water and they're just like, wow, this is a lot of work because podcasting is a lot of work. And I remember even when I started my podcast, I was just like busy doing this and that. And then it's like, wait, I'm doing it live too at the time. So in the beginning, I think for like first 20 episodes were like live. And I was like, I wanted to do a live podcast. And I was like, but this is too much work, 3 days a week, a live podcast. I mean, I would have to sacrifice a lot. I would have to adjust everything. And I was like, you know what? Let's just do pre-recorded, edited podcast. I think that's going to suit me better. I didn't say, let me stop and, figure this out again. It's kind of like this kind of pivot, do some changes that, okay, now I'm learning the process. This works better for me. And I was able to, keep it up for, I think we're around year 3 now or something like that. So we're making it. And in the beginning, if I didn't do that pivot, I would have been, one of the statistics that would have been pod fading. It's just like, oh, I don't have time to do the live things. Now I just started a live show now, but that was 3 years later. And then I said, I have time 1 day a week for a live show. I don't have time 3 days a week. So I wanted to get into the aspects of how can people figure out, well, how much time do they truly have in their schedule to commit to a podcast?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So I love, I love your bravery of just going for it and doing the lives right off the bat. That is really courageous. So I commend you for doing that. But yes, I think it's important to sit down and really evaluate what do you have time to commit to consistently. So if you think to yourself, well, I think I could do once a week, and it gives you a little bit of anxiety of I might not be able to do it in the back of your mind, then just commit to that 2 times a month where you know that you know that you know you're going to show up those 2 times a month on those specific days because you can always add. And certainly you can have a story like yours where you figure it out as you go and adjust and make those pivots. And I think that having that realistic conversation of what is actually going to benefit me and the listener doing it well consistently.
Yeah, it's the quality aspect too, where you want to put the best quality out. And if you feel just drained, burned out, you're just going to come in with a half heart. And your energy just coming into the podcast was just so bright, just so full. It's just like, I knew we are going to have a great conversation today because you had that. And if you're just coming into your podcast, you're just like, all right, guys, here we go again. I got to do another podcast because, it's a Tuesday. But if you say it's Tuesday, I can't wait to do my podcast, that's just so much more powerful. And then if you just say, I'm going to do it XYZ amount of days a month, or I'm going to do it on this day every single week, and you stay true to that commitment, you become so much more stronger in mindset. You become more confident. You're like, I'm doing what I said I'm going to be doing, rather than just kind of saying, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it eventually. It's almost like the people saying, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, right? And then tomorrow comes and like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. It's just like we keep putting it off until like, oh, wait, I've been putting it off for a whole entire year. We need to begin to take more action right now. And even when I was starting to do the podcast, I was a little nervous. I didn't know anything about podcasting. So I was like, you know what? Let me get someone who knows how to do podcasting and we're going to have a podcast together, right? That was a mistake, number one, because we just have different views. So finding the people that you want to collaborate with is important too. But then looking at certain things from other podcasters, like what type of equipment do you need to start off, et cetera, et cetera. Like learning those basics from him was beneficial for me rather than making him a co-host with me. Because I think we would have had a great show, but it would be a very different show than what I have right now myself. What I've created is about personal development. And then I was able to create other shows to kind of differentiate some of the conversations that I want to have. But it's important that you know your why, as you said, and it's important that you know what you want to talk about and what you want to bring to the world. Because as you said, you do 2 podcasts, you have ministry, and then you have women empowerment. That right there are 2 of your callings, right? Where you just find so much joy, so much passion in it. How do you help people find that passion in their podcast if they already have a podcast already started, or if they have a podcast that started, how you help them pivot to finding that drive for them?
Yeah. That's a good question. So I truly believe that most people who start a podcast are doing it to serve others. And there's so much depth in that. And really, that's where the coaching comes in. I view a coach as somebody who is sitting in one chair. I'm sitting in one chair and I'm pulling out from within them, the expert. They know themselves better than anybody else, right? It's my job as a coach to ask those questions of what is it that makes you sing inside? What is it when somebody reaches out to you and they say, this episode changed my life, or it brought me to tears, or I feel so seen? Like those little moments are such huge clues of like, oh, that's your calling right there. And so I can tell you for me personally, when I really started to hear my own calling was when I started recording and hearing myself continually say things. And one really common phrase that I'll say a lot is use your own voice. Your voice matters. Be seen, be heard, be known. And that is threaded through every podcast I do, every coaching conversation, whether it's my ministry or it's my podcast about podcasting. So it's really just digging into those deep, deep places of our values as a person and what we truly are here for in our identity and our mission and our purpose.
Even for me, like, I had a mentor who told me what I'm good at. And even though I was like in the profession of teaching and education, I had an inclination in my head, like, I'm really good at this. I excel at this. People tell me I'm good at it all the time. But it wasn't until I had a mentor, like literally a mentor, not just a random person saying, oh, you're great at this. It was like a person saying, this is what you need to be doing for the rest of your life. Changed my whole entire life because it was like I was avoiding it. I was like running away from it. I was trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. And then it wasn't until he said, hey, you need to focus on this. And I was like, why? He goes, because it lights you up. Whenever you talk about it, you just are a different person. You just are so much more brighter. I was like, oh, I didn't see it. But then when he made it aware to me, I was like, now I see it. And you see that in people where you find what they're passionate about, where you find that light, where they're talking about something, they're just like, over the moon. That right there, you're like, that's it. That's the magic. And it's very hard for people to find that by themselves because maybe we have limiting beliefs, self-doubts. And until you have a coach, mentor, guide, someone saying, this is what you have to go after, that's so powerful. And the power of our voice is powerful because I think sometimes we learn, even here in America, especially predominantly here in America, as we learn that our voice should be quiet. We should raise our hand when we have to speak. But then we become adults and now our voice should be powerful. We should embrace that. We should embrace our beliefs. But we have been told the limiting beliefs. And now we want to spread our voice, but then we're a little nervous. We're a little cautious. We think we sound weird. We're uncomfortable. Yet we do it every single day. How do you help people find their voice, be comfortable in their voice, and then express that voice?
Oh man. So this hits deep for me. So the first job I had in podcasting, I was a producer. So I did all of the background things. I worked for a very well-known family in broadcasting, and I worked with guests and very big authors and influencers, even though they weren't called influencers yet. So I did all the back end. Well, this host kept saying, Producer K, we want to hear from you. Can you come behind the mic and talk? And I'd be like, oh, I don't want to. But over and over, he invited me on there. And then eventually his wife and I had our own little segment on their show. They were the ones that initially gave me the blessing of like, hey, go start your own podcast. You need to use your voice. Well, what happened was I started recording these little snippets of these imaginary moments, almost like meditations for the wife of the show. She was going through cancer. And so I was like, I would love to send you these. Anyway, she was like, Kristin, your voice is so calming. You have such a gift of just bringing so much peace. And I, in my own limiting beliefs, always thought my voice was annoying, even though as a little girl, I used to, record cassette tapes with my initials. I would name my radio station like KFM Rocks and, do all the fun pretending to be a radio producer. But there was a little point in time where all of a sudden it was really annoying. And so I just shut it down until that time about, oh gosh, when was that? 2016. And I started recording stuff for her and she had told me that. And so, like you said, that power of somebody seeing something in you and understanding like, oh, okay, I'm starting to believe that I can bring something to the table that maybe somebody else doesn't have that fluidity or peace that's coming and it's actually blessing somebody instead of annoying somebody. So that was the beginning of my journey of really discovering that my voice did matter and it was impactful. So when I'm sitting with somebody, with a client, and I can almost instantly hear the imposter syndrome kick in when they say, who am I to start a podcast? And I would say in my boot camps, about half of the women in there go through this process of who am I to start a podcast? And it's totally normal. And my question to defeat that is, yes, who are you? Who are you? What is the background story that you're bringing to the table that you get to be at this table and share your story or share your heart or encouragement to other people? So yes, using your voice is so impactful. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, no, spot on there because even when I was younger, like I was like never a really good singer, or I gave myself that belief I wasn't a good singer because I was like, yeah, I'm not a good singer because I'm not like one of the superstars, right? I'm not a rock star, right? Yeah, I can sing in tune, I can sing in melody and things like that, but I wasn't a good singer. Well, guess what I did in my job? I went to be a music teacher. You got to do you got to do a lot of singing, and if you want to be a music teacher. So I was like, going into the profession, like, I don't know how to sing. Why am I a music teacher? Right. But I just enjoyed teaching. It wasn't so much about the music teaching. It was just, I enjoyed teaching. And I didn't know that yet. It was just when I was in high school and I was going off to college, I was doing accounting, business, finance. And I said, I don't want to do this no more because it was just like heartless and soulless. Then I said, all right, what do I enjoy doing? And I was playing guitar at the time. I was like, I enjoy playing guitar. I like teaching too. Let me teach guitar. Let me teach music. Basically is what it came down to. I could have taught kindergarten. I could have taught first grade and I would have loved it. It didn't have to be music, but it was music. So I'm in there and I'm thinking like, I'm not a good singer. Like, what am I doing? So I went in unconfident. I just was not confident. And my cooperating teacher at the elementary level, he was like, he's like, you could be a good singer. Like, you sound great. And then it was just like fixing a couple things, getting a little bit more in tune, finding out how to be in tune and embracing my voice. And once I did that, I was like spot on. I was like, boom. And I remember the disparity from the weeks of me working with him, it was like 9 weeks him and I worked together. And from my first observation was like, I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks into the whole process, and I did terrible. Singing was terrible. Everything was terrible. It was bad. It was bad. Like the professor said, you're going to fail. I was like, Jesus. So he basically sat me down. He said, listen, you just need to, tighten things up a little bit. This is how you do it. He coached me. I was like, all right, got it. From there, we do the next observation about 4 weeks later, almost toward the end of the process of cooperating teaching. The professor came in, says, I don't even recognize this person anymore. Because it was such a big difference. It's because I embraced my voice. I said, I am a good singer. I can be a good singer rather than having that limiting belief. And then when I started teaching in the schools, kids would say, I'm not a good singer and things like that. And I'm like, well, like who told you that? Things like that. And then we would go be confident. And I created that environment of this is a safe area. Anyone can sing. Anyone can be a good singer. We're about having a good time. And then the kids would even use me as example, right? So look, they would sing something and then they'll say, oh, can you sing this for me? And I'll sing it. And just like, see, that's good singing. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, what are you talking about? So, so even there, it's just like, we just have to remain confident. And you have such a great podcast voice also. It's just like pleasing. And a lot of people have that voice. They can be very calming. And I think it comes to being true to your nature. It's not trying to be someone who you're not. Because if I try to be a false person, like, hey, yo, I'm this guy,
Yeah.
I'm doing that. It's going to be so uncomfortable for people to listen to because people can tell if you're being true to yourself or if you're being an imposter.
Yes. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I love what you said about there was that moment for you of embracing what was actually true, which was you're a good singer. And you do too have a very beautiful, fluid voice for podcasting as well. So, on the embracing part, it makes me think of I literally just had a client this morning text me. She's 5 episodes in, and she said, Kristin, you are so right. I do have a gift of storytelling. And she sent me a screenshot of somebody who had sent her a text saying, I just listened to your episode. I love how you tell stories. It's such a gift. And it was this embracing moment for her this morning to be like, you're right. I do have this gift of storytelling. And I think that's where the beauty of having that coach or mentor to plant those seeds of awareness of you do have a gift to this world. And sometimes we need that outside perspective or that outside coaching, like your voice teacher or co-ed or co-teacher that was
Mm-hmm.
helping you with
Mm-hmm.
your voice. Yeah, I think there's so much beauty in having other people come alongside and call out those giftings.
And when a person is down in that mindset, I'm going to start a podcast, I'm going to start a show. How do they know they need a podcast coach? How do they know they need some guidance before they begin, before they hit record, before they buy all the equipment? How do they know they need someone like you in their corner to help them flourish?
Yeah. So I always say, do you want to do it well or do you want to take a long time trying to figure out how to do it well?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big fan of grabbing mentors and coaches and asking questions so that it saves you time and energy along the way. So anybody who is really wanting to, not have to put in hours and hours and hours of research of the best microphone and the best hosting platform and all of the logistics and all of that, it is time consuming. So if you don't have the extra time to do that, then absolutely hire a coach. I would love to work with you. I'm sure that you know more people that could be of help too. There's so many podcasts out there about podcast coaching. Yeah, it's just right there for you.
Well, Kristin, I have some news for you. You are the number one. You are the number one
Uh,
podcast coach. So if someone comes to me and they say, hey, I need help with my podcast, hey, I'm going to send them your way because you are the person who's going to help people excel. And I think that's so important to have someone like that because we can do things ourselves, right? When I was going through the hardest parts of my life, I did it by myself, sort of. I had books. I read books. Those were my mentors, those authors, and I would just digest that. But it took so much longer to do that by myself than if I just had a mentor, had a coach. I learned that later on in life. It's just like I can be so much better, so much quicker. Not saying that we shouldn't enjoy the journey. We should always enjoy the journey.
Absolutely.
But why not be efficient? Why not be effective from the start? Build confidence sooner rather than later. And, my whole teaching career, my whole coaching career, it has been built on the foundation of working together, working with people, because that is what we need, community, right? And when you're a podcast host, who are you speaking to? You're speaking to a community of people who believe in you, who enjoy listening to you, who want to support you in every way. And that's important that you understand that too, right? So you have to find people who support you just as you support your community. And our conversation today is just a tippy top of what you do, how you help people. Can you give us some last words, and can you please tell the audience where they can find you? And then any people who might be podcast hosts to reach out to you, and then of course begin that process to making the best podcast ever.
Just the last thing that I would say is, if that little whisper inside of you is fluttering of, oh, do I want to start a podcast? I encourage you to reach out and let's just have a conversation and see where that little dream could become a big dream. And the best way I would say that people can find me is through my podcast, Wholistic Podcasting, podcast coaching for female entrepreneurs. Or you can find me on Instagram at Kristin Chadwick. I love leading groups of people through the podcast process, whether you're a brand new podcaster and you are like, I have no idea where to start. Then I have a boot camp called Podcast Boot Camp, from idea to launch. And it's a 9-week program where we literally go step by step by step through the coaching process and all of the technical pieces. We edit your first show. We give you a template. It's really fun to watch a group of people go through that process. The other boot camp that I have is Podcast Growth Course, and that is a group coaching 8-week session where we go through, how do we grow your podcast? How do we monetize your podcast? How do we better align your podcast so that you are getting traction and doing the dream that you wanted to do at the very beginning? So those are a few ways that people can connect with me.
Excellent. And I will definitely put all those links in the description box below so people can easily reach out to you. And I do encourage people also, if you have that voice inside you, to start something. Don't let that voice just remain there. If you have a negative voice, don't let that remain as your prominent and dominant voice. Learn how to let your voice shine, be more positive, be more uplifting, because we all have something to offer to the world. And it's important that we don't just let our talents sit there idle or go to waste. You do a great job at uncovering those talents in people, helping people shine, finding that light, finding their purpose, their why, their passions, their gifts, all of those wonderful things that people want in their life. So be brave, be courageous, take action today. Reach out to Kristin, and you're going to find that you have that voice, you have that power within you. I want to thank you so much, Kristin, for coming on Coaching in Session. Great conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been an honor.